the communication is paramount. Okay, to be able to communicate what we need so that the work is done accurately the first time around, so that we don't have a lot of back and forth and spend a lot of time on things. When you have a local team, yeah, it's easier. It's easier to just walk into an office or walk up to a desk and you can put something in front of somebody and say, hey, I need you to move this here and do this, or what do you think about this? Would this be better? So there is a level of collaboration that is easier to do in the office. That's for sure. No doubt. But we don't do the graphics work here, but you've got to have a really good handle on what you're wanting to produce so that you can effectively communicate that to the team. And so, the skill sets that we need to have is how to accurately request the work that we need to have produced, how to accurately describe what needs to happen. So you've got to be a little bit of a wordsmith and be able to type really well. And that may springboard us into a conversation about other challenges.
I
Yeah.
love to hear those, and I think that's what you mentioned there is, it's easier to have a domestic team in many ways, because like you said, you just go into the office, but I think it requires having a remote team more intentionality. That's a word that I use quite a bit. And I think that that's what I was hearing you say. And also regarding, just making sure that your expectations are clear. That's what you're talking about. And that is so critically important, because I think a lot of times people assume a lot of things along the way, and we know what happens when you assume, right? And so I see this all the time, and this is how you're able to do this effectively, by making sure that they know what their expectations are, and it's clear communication. Clarity is kindness. And making sure that, you're being intentional in that. And so I mentioned, it's when we talk about remote staff, this is not the absence of problems, right? If you have employees, you have people, no matter if they're working domestically or they're working remotely, you're going to have some challenges. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. What have you experienced? We don't try to shy away from that, when we're talking, even though it might be my team, is like, this is going to happen. And then how do we go about addressing that? So I'd love to hear with that, because I think people really, that's a fear that a lot of people have. What are the challenges you're going to have? And then how are we going to overcome them?
Like I said, it could depend a little bit on what your needs are. If you're in a particular business where you don't have the deadline looming over you. I mean, in any business, time is money. So you want to be able to do what you do quickly and effectively and profitably. But the challenge that we have is, like I said, we need kind of quick turnaround on things, which is why the communication is so important. When I first arrived, we were already working with a remote team, but there was and there were a few of us who arrived at about the same time. So we have like this little group of people here who are new, and we're trying to kind of continue the process that was laid out before us. And we realized that a lot of mistakes were being made, and the question was raised: why? Why are we getting all of these errors? We kind of figured out that the process really wasn't very streamlined. And I don't think that there was really good communication. And these days, now we don't do any phone calls. Sometimes I'm a phone guy. I'm sitting next to my phone here. I like to just pick up the phone, say, hey, Jack, we have this problem. Let's get it fixed. But we can't do that here. So because you're talking about a difference in culture with people overseas, a little bit of a communication gap there. So a lot of typing is the way we communicate back and forth. So, the challenge was, okay, how do we fix this so that our expectations are more clear? So the first thing we did is and I think this was the first time that this was done. It almost sounds like you might be able to speak to this more than I, but, we set up a Zoom meeting and met the team, and so we had face-to-face, we knew who we were talking with. So we set up a meeting to discuss, here's these issues, this is what's happening, how can we streamline this to make it easier for you? So it took an extra level of communication there in the beginning, and we hammered out some details on a new workflow that would make things easier for us, easier for them. We're able to, there's places where we can really go into detail about what we want. And that has been over the past year and a half since we started that, maybe a little more than a year and a half. That has dramatically increased the speed of the workflow back and forth. And anytime we would start to see some issues crop up, we would explain that by email. Hey, we've got some of these issues. And then if it didn't get resolved, then we would set up another Zoom meeting. We would talk, because we don't talk on the phone, regularly. So we would set up a meeting and talk about those things and clear it up, and then it would be fixed. So any challenge can be overcome. Any problem that you have, with just a little bit of time to take to fix it and to communicate your expectations, it's oil on the gears. Then the machine runs smoother.
So I'm curious, like working with your domestic staff and your remote teams, what has been your experience or what has been their experience? So what kind of feedback have you gotten, good, bad, or indifferent? Sometimes people, really it's like, oh, why are we doing this? And, I don't understand. Why don't we just hire more people here? Were you getting any more of that pushback? Do you find, is there any challenges, integrating them with the domestic staff to make sure that everybody was happy?
Mhm.
Because this really, from my understanding, is you didn't take off staff and replace anybody. Basically, you're needing more staff. You couldn't find them, but so
Yeah, no, it's we most of us, at least the ones who interact on a daily basis, we're pretty well on board, with what we're doing,
yeah,
and we it's part of our job on a day to day. And there may be some who don't quite maybe understand the process, or sometimes say, oh, why do you have to send that back, so many times, or why do you. So yeah, those people do kind of pipe up sometimes, but it's really not an issue. And
yeah.
in our particular, we're a pretty small group here, so it's really not that much of an issue.
And that's another thing that people are worried about, and so that's one of the reasons that I bring it up is because like how are my local team going to accept it? And so it's just one thing that people are going to need to at least consider if they're considering going down this road. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah.